Good morning on this glorious July day. Erev Rosh Chodesh. This week's Torah portion is Matos and Masei. We finished the book of Numbers, and on Shabbos and Shul we're going to say Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek as we begin the book of Devarim next week, Deuteronomy, and we prepare for the high holidays, believe it or not, which will be 7 weeks from next week. In any case, in this week's Torah portion, we read about the tribe of Gad and Reuven and half of the Shevet of Menashe, half of Menashe. And we read about how they asked Moses and pleaded with him to be able to get their portion of the land of Israel on the Trans-Jordan, on the east side of the Jordan River, not going into Israel, but staying on the east side, on the Trans-Jordan, and being able to live there. And there's many commentaries of why they wanted it and why Moses got upset and why eventually he relinquished and allowed them to do it. But there's one beautiful commentary that I saw that basically says that what Gad, Reuben, and half of Menashe were doing is they were linking for eternity the Jews of Israel and the Jews of the diaspora by deciding to live outside of Israel and being linked by the Trans-Jordan but not living in Israel. They were connecting for eternity the destiny, the fidelity, the love of the Jewish people in the diaspora and the Jewish people in Israel. You see, some Jews are blessed to live in the Holy Land and to breathe its fresh air every day and to wake up to the cobblestones of Jerusalem and to the holiest sites of Judaism every day. And many of us live in the diaspora and we dream every day about going to Israel and visiting Israel, and we pray for Israel and we support Israel. Gruni and I are very, very lucky that after we finish camp next week and after the Tisha B'Av fast of the 9th of Av, all 12 of us will be traveling to the Holy Land of Israel, and we will be spending time in the holy city of Jerusalem. And I think about this a lot, about Gad, Reuben, and half of Menashe, and linking the Jewish people in the diaspora in Israel. As many of you know, my dad was born in Jerusalem in 1940. And through destiny and the tragic passing of his mother, he ended up in the States by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, which was a blessing for me, where I grew up in Brooklyn. But my father's entire family, all of them lived in the Holy Land of Israel. And back then, calling international and flying wasn't like it is today. I didn't go to Israel for the first time till I was nearly 20 years old. I think I was 19 or 20 already for the first time that I went to Israel. And we weren't in touch with our cousins every single day. Yet we felt this close affinity. So close, in fact, in a sense, closer than to the cousins that we lived near. And later on in life, when I traveled to Israel, and now we have a WhatsApp group with my first cousins. My father had 11 siblings and hundreds of first cousins for us and first cousins once we moved. And we became very close. That affinity, although we lived in the Trans-Jordan, so to speak, in the diaspora, we felt so close the whole time to our family living in Israel. And it's been a blessing because the few times that we've been back with our family, and again, when we leave after Tisha B'Av, my parents will be traveling with me. My father, who just celebrated his birthday on Shabbat, turned 82, and my dear mom, they should both live and be healthy, will be coming to the Holy Land. And my father, out of his 11 siblings, there are 5 that are still alive. 6 that are still alive, and they will be spending the Shabbat together by his siblings, and together we will all see them on Shabbat. And it's a very special time for us, remembering the story of Gad and Reuben and half of Menashe, of connecting the diaspora and Israel, knowing that although we might live in the diaspora, we are all connected. We are all one people. You know, one of the most successful organizations since modern Israel was Birthright Israel, sending hundreds of thousands of young Jewish teens and young adults to the Holy Land of Israel to visit their eternal land, their ancestral land, the home of their fathers and mothers. And Gruni also does a trip for young mothers. In fact, in the end of October, on October 30th, Gruni together with Deborah Millam, they're taking 20 ladies to the Holy Land. And it's a very special organization, Birthright. And one of its main founders and supporters was a very special Jew from Boston named Sheldon Adelson, who many of you have heard of, a multi-billionaire in Israel. Well, Sheldon Adelson's parents were immigrants, and they moved to Boston poor, without anything. And his father was a cab driver. And Sheldon Adelson, when he helped found Birthright and supported with so much money, says how his father would work all day driving a cab, and he would come home, and at the end of the day, he would take out dollar bills, and he would stuff it into the JNF, Jewish National Fund, tzedakah box, to give charity for Israel. And he couldn't understand. His father was so poor and he worked so hard. Why was he giving away his hard-earned money? And one time he confronted his dad. He said, "Dad, what are you doing?" And his father looked at him, and his father said, "Sheldon, no matter how little we have, there are those that have less than us. And it's our obligation to support the Holy Land of Israel." And Sheldon says that his father never merited to go to the Holy Land of Israel. But when he became wealthy and affluent, and after the 1967 war, he got to go to Israel for the first time. And he said, "Me and my dad were the same shoe size. And I put on my father's shoes, and I took an El Al flight and landed in Tel Aviv. And I walked the width and the breadth of the land in the shoes and the footsteps of my father, in what he set for me." And Sheldon said that since then he decided to support Israel with all his strength and vigor because of what his father had taught him. And that's the message of God in Reuben and half of Menashe. You might live in the diaspora, you might live in Boston and New York and Miami and Paris and Argentina, but yet we're interlinked for eternity with the Holy Land and the Jewish people that live there. And God willing, when we go to the Holy Land of Israel, we hope to include you in our trip through some FaceTime Lives and some of our Torahs into the holy, beautiful land of Israel. Have yourself a great day.